Welcome to the Zoë Routh Leadership Podcast, your source of strategies and insights to make you a better leader. Influence, improve, inspire.
Hi, this is Zoë Routh, and I am super delighted to bring you Dermot Crowley on today's podcast. Dermot is Australia's leading productivity expert, and he has spent the best part of 20 years working with companies big and small around productivity habits and systems. Now, he says somewhere around 2002, he noticed something. He noticed that technology had really suddenly changed, but people's habits and systems hadn't. And it was really holding us back. We had not adapted our behavior to what the tech was allowing us to do. So his whole business is around adaptation and being able to do smart work. He is also the author of the best-selling business book, Smart Work. And he is really about helping us use tech so we can be seamlessly productive. Welcome, Dermot.
Thanks, Zoe. What a lovely introduction. That was that really nailed what I'm about. Thank you.
Yay! I'm glad I got it right. That's a good thing. Well, the first thing that people are going to notice, apart from my funny Canadian accent, which I've explained many times, is your funny accent. So where is your funny accent from, and how did you end up in Australia?
My goodness, some people would take exception to that and go, well, I don't have a funny accent. I've got a nice accent, but it's not funny, not like yours. No, well picked up. I am originally from Dublin, Ireland. I came out here about 25 years ago. And to be honest, I was a backpacker when I came out to Australia. So I was on a year working visa with my mates, having a great time drinking my way around Australia.
Really?
And then I went and fell in love with a Sydney woman, settled down and got married. And I also fell in love with Australia. I kind of felt that when I came to Australia that I came home. I had that real sense of this is where I belong. And that hasn't left. I still drive over to Sydney Harbour Bridge 25 years later and go, oh my God, I live in Sydney. That's amazing.
It is a beautiful city, and I have that experience every time I visit Sydney too. It's like, wow, this is spectacular. I have it less so in Canberra, but I think we just become too accustomed to our own surrounds. And I think that's also probably we become too accustomed to our habits also, which I think is one of the hallmarks of your work, is talking about habits and productivity. So it's interesting. How did you go from boozing backpacker to productivity expert?
To boozing productivity expert. didn't give that up. Scaled it down a little bit. Look, I kind of fell into what I do. I worked in the retail industry in Ireland and actually worked for a wine company. Was very honoured to work with one of the few masters of wine in Ireland. And that was my whole background, retail. But when I came to Australia, I wanted to do something different. And I fell into a sales job selling productivity training for a time management company. And this was back in the days of paper diary systems.
Yep.
So there was no tech, there was no email, there was no Microsoft Outlook. We used to teach people how to use paper diaries. And again, I fell in love with the whole idea of productivity and being organized. I wasn't naturally an organized person myself. And I really loved the idea of scheduling and prioritizing. And I suppose, probably after about 5 years working for that company, I had an opportunity to either go find something else to do because I was made redundant, or start my own business. And I chose to start my own business and start running productivity training myself. And I never looked back.
Wow. That's really cool. And you know what? I still meet people who have paper diaries. Can you believe it?
I believe it. I know it.
You've seen all that stuff, I'm sure. So I'm going to
It is a bit scary when you see it, yeah.
Well, they have plenty of reasons, rationale why they do it, and yet I feel sorry for them. One, because it just adds heaviness to the stuff they have to carry around. And two, it's so inefficient. You can't search anything.
Yeah, so that's right. And they're normally trying to, carry their paper diary and their iPhone at the same time. And what they don't seem to have realized is their iPhone can have their whole schedule, their to-do list, their emails, all of that on it. And I know there's lots of arguments for people saying, I don't want to be connected to my email on my phone. But I think if you've got a good attitude towards your inbox on your desktop, then you can have a very healthy relationship with email on your phone, and it's only going to make you more productive. So,
ooh, healthy attitude towards email and a good relationship with your inbox. It sounds very deeply personal. So tell me a little bit about that. What's a good attitude to email about?
Well, I reckon that email is probably the biggest issue that I'm asked to certainly talk about, even though it's not really what productivity is about. In fact, email gets in the way of a lot of productivity, but at the same time, it helps us to do our work. So I don't want to make email the bad guy. But most people I'm working with are completely overwhelmed by their inbox. They're often getting 100 plus emails a day. There's lots of executives that I'm working with who will get 300 to 400 emails a day, and they think that that's kind of normal.
Wow.
There's a lot of information that's coming at us. And while a lot of it is just noise, the fact is we get it every day, and it's overwhelming. And in amongst that noise is some signal, some emails that we actually do need to be across, or we do need to action, or we do need to read. And I tend to find that people are just struggling to keep on top of that. They're overwhelmed by their inboxes, and most people have very bad relationships with their inbox. So they tend to use their inbox as a bit of a filing system and a bit of a to-do list. And it's actually the worst to-do list in the world. It's just a big pile of stuff, and some of it needs action and some of it doesn't. So when I talk about having a healthy relationship with your inbox, it's about understanding what your inbox actually is for. It's to receive emails. It's a workspace. And just like your desk, if you imagine your desk being completely piled up with paperwork everywhere all of the time, it's kind of stressful to work like that. The same with your inbox. It's a workspace, and if it's full of emails all the time, you're always going to feel like you're behind the eight ball and things are slipping through the cracks. So what I try to do to make people have a healthy relationship with their inbox is to teach them how to get their inbox down to zero on a regular basis. So my expectation is at least once a week, you should have absolutely nothing in your inbox. And I don't mean just that everything's been read. I mean that you actually do not have any emails in your inbox.
Whoa. And how do we do that?
I reckon that what you need to do is set up good systems around how you manage your work. And this is why I'm so excited about what technology can do for us in terms of our productivity. So most of the corporate workplace that I would work with would use either Microsoft Outlook, which is by far the dominant productivity tool out there. I'd say 90% of the workforce is using Outlook, and then the other 10% are probably using Gmail or something similar. Either way, these are not just inboxes. They're not just for managing email. They're also designed to help you to manage your workflow. And there's a part of each of these tools that's designed to manage what I would call actions. So you've got two types of actions. You've got meetings and you've got tasks. And most people have made the connection between their inbox and their calendar, because when you receive a meeting invitation and you press accept on it, what will happen is the email will disappear from your inbox, but it will actually put the meeting into your calendar so that you remember that you've got a meeting at 3:00 on Thursday. So most people are okay with that idea now, and that means that they always manage their meetings in their calendar, which is a purpose-built tool to help them to remember where they need to be and when they need to be there. But when it comes to the other side of your actions, your task workload and your priorities, the problem there is most people don't have one centralized tool to manage all of that. They tend to use fragmented tools. So some of the things you need to do are in your inbox. Some of the things you need to do are in your to-do list. Some of them are in your meeting notebook. Some of them are in the piles of paper that are still on your desk. Some of them are on little post-it notes on your computer screen. And many of them, unfortunately, are still being carried around in our head.
Oh.
And because, sorry, guys, go ahead. Am I describing you?
Well, a lot of that was until you hit post-it notes. I'm like, thank God I don't have that problem. And then I was like, thank God I don't try and keep anything in my head. It's already a mess as it is. So I have a few of those other habits. I'm like, oh, cringe. Like,
Sure.
Need to fix these.
So I guess what I try to do is I try to help people to centralize their work in one central tool. So all of your meetings should be in your calendar, and that gives you one place of truth to make sure that you don't forget to go to a meeting. But I also believe that all of your tasks should be in one centralized task list. And that's why I go beyond teaching people how to use the inbox in a tool like Microsoft Outlook or Gmail. We also need to have a look at how do we use our calendar and how do we use the task list in these tools to effectively schedule and manage our priorities. And one of the really cool things you can do in both of these tools is if you receive an email that you need to action, it might be something that you need to do, but you don't have to do it right now. You're usually able to just press a button and turn that email into a task and schedule it into your scheduling system. So Microsoft and Google have both thought about how do people manage workflow. The problem, and they build tools around this, the problem is most people don't do this. They just use their inbox as a very ineffective way of trying to keep on top of what they haven't done yet.
So this is one of my challenges. I'm wondering if you can help me, Dr. Dermot, this illness I have.
My pleasure.
Is that when I try to do this thing, like you're talking about, putting the tasks into the calendar, what I've noticed is that I greatly overestimate what I think I can do in the time allocated. And then I get to the end of the day and half those tasks haven't been done. And I neglect to drag them forward into the next possible spot to do them. So I reckon there's a couple illnesses in there. What do you reckon? What's the fix for that challenge?
Yeah, look, it's a very common issue. So again, it comes back to understanding the difference between a meeting and a task. So for me, meetings are a type of work that I would call fixed. So a meeting is an activity that needs to happen at a very fixed time and will usually have a duration. And because it involves other people, what we need to do is choose an agreed time and lock that activity into that time in our calendars so that it's in all our calendars at the same time. So that's what I call fixed work, and the calendar is the perfect tool to manage that type of work. But your tasks and your priorities are a little bit different. They're what I call flexible work. You see, tasks are generally things that you need to do, but you're often doing them by yourself, so they don't involve other people. And they don't have to be done at any specific time. They might have a deadline that they need to be done by, but you don't have to do that task at 10 o'clock or at 3 o'clock or at 2:15. You just need to make sure you do it before the workshop on Friday. So tasks need a different system to manage them effectively. They need a more flexible system. And putting everything into your calendar, the downside is this. Yes, sure, you are scheduling time to do your work. That's great. But things change, and like it's human nature. We always overestimate how much time we've got available and how much we could possibly get done. So the things that you don't get done in your calendar, you physically have to remember to reallocate a time to them. Whereas if you start to use a tool like the task list in Microsoft Outlook or in Gmail, whichever you're using, it manages this for you. So often these systems will make sure that if you don't do a task on a particular day, it'll automatically roll forward to the next day. So you don't forget to do it. using a task system to manage your priorities also has the benefit of being able to mark things complete. So a common friend of ours, Dr. Jason Fox, in his book, The Game Changer, he talks about the idea that we've lost a lot of our motivation in today's modern workplace because we tend to work out of our inbox. And every time we deal with an email, 10 more arrive in on top of it. So you get no sense of progress. Whereas if you're used to managing your priorities in a well-structured task list, you've got the ability to mark things complete, and you actually get a sense of motivation as you work through your day. And that's missing when you put things into your calendar, because there's no tick box to say, yeah, that's been done. So there's some very compelling reasons to actually use a proper task system to manage your priorities, I reckon.
Oh, thank you. Well, that makes me feel better already, because that was just a pain. I thought I was like, I'm trying to do it right, but it's not working. So that's good.
Exactly.
So having a really useful, well-organized task list system is the critical point here. And you're right. Like, I get such a sense of satisfaction, that little dopamine hit as you go tick, and you have that line go through the item. So that's really good. So do you recommend booking times in your calendar that are task, like you could just put general topic of complete tasks or task on task list as opposed to itemizing them?
Yeah, look, I guess it depends on how compressed your schedule is. So if I'm working with someone who doesn't have a very heavy meeting workload, they might have a couple of meetings a day or a few meetings in a week, then they don't have a lot of compression on their schedule. So they probably don't need to block time out to do tasks. But when I'm working with an executive who tends to spend most days in meetings all day, one of the first issues I often need to deal with, and this happens very often at the senior management level, we give too much of our time away to meetings and we don't protect time for doing task workload. So what then happens is they're in meetings from 8:30 in the morning until 6 at night with no room for doing any priorities. So then they end up working from 6 at night until 10 o'clock at night trying to catch up on their other work. So they end up working longer work hours, and they have a real problem with work-life balance and all of those things. So what I try to do in that situation is to get them to protect a certain amount of their week for getting important stuff done that is not meeting driven. So I'll often recommend to an executive to protect maybe 30% of their core working hours for doing tasks. And in that case, they would block out general time to say, okay, I'm going to block out 2 hours here, 2 hours there, and I'm going to protect that for doing tasks. So that's one strategy. Okay. Second strategy I would suggest is, if you put every task into your calendar, it becomes too inflexible, as you've found. But you can put some tasks into your calendar and it serves you. So my rule of thumb is anything that's going to take me an hour or more of my time, I'll probably block it out on my calendar and what I call hard schedule it into my system rather than just soft scheduling it in my task list. And that helps me to, number one, protect the time for that piece of work, but it also reduces the chances of me procrastinating over that piece of work, because it's when it's in my calendar, it's going to pop up an alert to say, okay, it's 3 o'clock, you need to put everything else away and do that piece of work. So when you use it in certain situations, it works well, I reckon. Okay,
cool. That is very helpful for me. Hopefully other people too. It's not just for me, but I am selfishly.
This is such a selfish thing you do. Yes.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit more about your productivity system that you expand on in your book. And the 3 components are capture, consider, and commit. What are the biggest, if you could explain what those mean actually, and what you find are the biggest objections or problems people have in those areas?
Sure. So when I'm, especially around managing actions, I think that what we need to do is to get really clear and make visible what needs our time and attention. And that means that we need to have good capturing systems. David Allen, who's an American productivity expert, he wrote a book called Getting Things Done. He talks a lot about this idea of capturing everything that you need to do and making it visible in a central place so that you've got real clarity over what needs my attention. Work comes at us in different ways. So yes, you do receive emails, but you also probably receive phone calls, voicemail messages, interruptions, meeting actions, and what I call mind clutter, where you're constantly thinking of things that you need to do. So for me, the first step is get really good at capturing stuff and having a place to put it. So every time I think of something I need to do, what I'll do is if I'm at my desk, if it's something urgent, I might do it straight away. But if it's something that could wait till later or tomorrow or next week, I'll put it straight into my task list. So I don't let it bounce around in my head. I capture it in my task list, and that way I can let go of it from my head. If I'm out of the office and I think of something, I've actually designed an app for this on the iPhone and on Android devices called I don't even know the name of my own app, called Memo Mailer. And it's cool. It's a free app, so any of your listeners could go to the App Store for either of those devices and download it. But it's a simple voice memo recorder that allows you to very quickly capture a thought or an idea or something you need to do. The cool thing about it is it automatically emails that voice memo straight into your inbox. So you don't need to do anything except press a button on your phone to capture the voice memo. The minute you let go of the button on the screen, it'll email that sound file straight into your inbox. So that for me is a really good way of capturing stuff, getting it out of my head, and making sure that it's in a place that I trust, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I've heard people who use Memo Mailer and they take their phone with them when they go walking. And that's often when your creative ideas come out. And it's like, darn it, I've got nothing to write this down with. And they go, Memo Mailer, and there you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that would be the first thing that I would think about.
Okay, let me just mention the show notes, because I'll put a link in the show notes to the app so people can go and have a look at it. And the show notes are going to be at zoerouth.com/podcast/smartwork. And there'll be links to David Allen's book, to Dermot's book, to Memo Mailer app. Okay, so that's your first recommendation. What's your second one?
Yeah, so that's the kind of capture piece. When it comes to consider, and that really is... it's about prioritization. And once we've captured the stuff that we have decided is a good use of our time, either in our calendar, so meetings, or in our task list as priorities, then we need to work out, okay, what comes first, and what do I need to do now, and what could be done later. So I'm very much a big fan of having a dated task list. So I don't just have one big list of things I need to do. In my system in Microsoft Outlook, I'm able to schedule tasks for today or tomorrow or Thursday or next week or next month or whenever I want it to appear in my schedule. So that's actually a prioritization technique in itself. So I believe that the three common ways that we prioritize work are by filtering, scheduling, and sequencing. So I tend to filter as work is coming into me. So when I check my email, I will filter out the low value stuff, the stuff that is not a good use of my time. So I'll delete stuff, or I'll file stuff, or I'll delegate stuff to other people. And then I get rid of those emails from my inbox. But I filter in the stuff that is a good use of my time. So the things that I decide, yes, I need to do something with that, I'll either do them straight away if they're urgent or they're quick, or I'll schedule them into my system. So they either get scheduled into my calendar or into my task list. So by filtering my work at point of entry, then I'm ensuring that only the stuff that is a good use of my time ends up in my system. So that's the first type of prioritization. Then what I do is I actually schedule work. So if I make a decision that I need to do something today and I put it on my task list for today, that's me prioritizing that piece of work. And if I made a decision that, no, that could actually wait until Wednesday when I'm in the office, I'm also prioritizing it. So I really see your schedule as a way of making decisions about what should be done up front and what could wait until later. So that's a second type of prioritization. A third type of prioritization is what I call sequencing, where my task list for the day, well, what I'll do is, as a part of my daily planning, I'll actually sequence my task list from most important to least important. So I'm able to drag my tasks up and down the list. And that's my way of getting really clear about my day and getting really clear about what are my top priorities. And how that helps me is because I've done that little bit of thinking to say, okay, that's my number one priority, that's my number two, and that's my number three. When I'm not in meetings, I'm really focused about what I need to do next. So if I've got half an hour between meetings, what most people do in that situation is they'll go, oh, don't really have enough time to do anything meaningful, so I'm just going to do a few emails. Whereas if I've got half an hour between meetings, I'll go straight to my plan for the day and go, right, what's my top priority? I need to send that email. Okay, let's get that done. So it drives my day with a lot more intent than if I didn't bother prioritizing my list to begin with.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's awesome. So what's the commit piece about?
So the commit for me is about fighting for your priorities. It's, you said it yourself that sometimes it's easy to schedule things into your calendar, but you don't actually do them. And I don't want to pick on you, Zoe. I know that you're a very productive person, but it does happen. We often let the urgency of the day take over, and we procrastinate about the more important things that we need to do. Probably the biggest frustration that I have when I work in organizations is the fact that there's often a very reactive culture in place where people leave everything until the last minute and they only do things when they become urgent enough that they can't put them off anymore. And that means that they're also delegating work to other people at the last minute, putting pressure on them. And people then get into this cycle of just purely reacting to everything that's going on. And I believe that we need to work a lot more proactively. So for me, the commit piece is put a plan in place on a daily basis. You should have a daily plan, which is about focusing yourself. On a weekly basis, you should take time out to plan your week and get yourself organized for the week. And even on a monthly basis, I think that we need to take some time out to step back and get some perspective and get some clarity around what are my top priorities for the month ahead. Those three personal planning pieces for me are all about getting clear about what's important, making sure that the right actions are scheduled in our system, and then committing to them and fighting for them and not just letting the urgency of the day push them aside.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I feel very happy with that. And it's outlined really well in your book too, that whole piece about daily, weekly, monthly, and horizon planning. And that's a strategy I've used for a number of years now, is to reverse engineer my life. So starting with bigger horizon, 10, 20 years, boiling it down to yearly plans, then to quarterly, then to monthly, to weekly, to daily. So I'm glad I can take that part off in terms of what's working.
You're not a complete basket case.
No, just a partial one. So I have two questions to ask you about some more familiar recommendations around email and time management. So, there's been lots said in various forums about how to manage email. Do you just only check email once a day, twice a day? What are your guidelines around email checking processing?
Look, I think most productivity books or courses will talk about the idea of, number one, turning off your email alerts. It's such common sense that it pains me to have to say it, yet most people don't do it until you say it to them. So You shouldn't be getting email alerts. You don't need to get a bing or a bong or a sliding pane across your screen to tell you every time an email comes in, especially if you're getting 100 plus emails a day. It's just a distraction. So turn them off.
Yep.
And then set up a proactive routine around how often you check your email. Now, there are some philosophies that would say check your email twice a day and that's it. I find that probably a bit too limiting for most people. Although lots of senior executives I work with, they probably don't get near their inbox more than twice a day anyway, so that works fine for them. But what I try to do is just give people a more practical solution, which is this. I will check my email thoroughly twice a day. So once in the morning, I probably spend 30, 45 minutes on my email.
Yeah.
And then once in the afternoon, I probably spend another 30 minutes on my email. They're my main two processing zones. And that's when I'm doing the heavy lifting with my email. I'm making decisions. I'm clearing out my inbox. I'm turning emails into tasks, scheduling time in my calendar for certain things. But then outside of those two times, I probably check my email, but this time it's just a quick 5-minute check to see if there's anything urgent that I need to be across.
Yeah.
Often it's on my phone, and I might go in and delete a couple of things, file a couple of things, deal with a couple of things, but then I put my email away and I get back focused on my daily plan. I find that's a reasonable rhythm with your email, and most people find they can do their jobs perfectly well with that sort of healthy rhythm.
Okay. So it's not a religious strictly thing. It's sort of like do intense and then periodically check, which I think that works well for me. Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of process work through my email, sending out messages and so on. So the twice a day thing it would never work for me in terms of if that was the only time I got to do it.
Well, that's right. And if I've got a task in my task list and the task is to email a set of dates to one of my clients, well, I have to go into my inbox and send an email. So and I'm not going to close my eyes so I don't see any emails that are in my inbox. That would be kind of crazy. So you've got to be loose and relaxed about this and be light about it. But I guess what we're always trying to do is to get people to get their head out of their inbox and not live in there. So I often find that the inbox is the main screen that people have open all day long. And if you think about it, if your main screen in Outlook or Gmail is your inbox, then what you're looking at most of the time is an organizing system for everyone else's priorities, because that's all your inbox is. It's an organizing system for other people's priorities. So what I do is I make my daily plan in my calendar my main screen in Microsoft Outlook. So that's what I look at most of the time. And that's an organizing system for my priorities. Very different focus and intent.
That's awesome. Great tip. So I have a couple of questions that I got through Facebook. So I put it out to my Facebook group about talking to Dermot, productivity expert. What should I ask him? So I have a couple of questions from people from Facebook. And one of them is around versions of the Pomodoro technique. And this particular person wanted to know, the recommendations are, work for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, or only work for 90 minutes and then take a break. Do you have any guidelines around focused work, deep work, and break times? Is there an ideal routine?
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of that type of work. Again, I'm not hard and fast around the number of minutes. I'm not going to say 23 minutes is the optimal time that we can concentrate. I think everyone's different. And I think you need to find your own balance for the amount of time that you can concentrate in deep work at one time. But whether it's 25 minutes or whether it's 90 minutes, I am a big fan of the idea of focus intensely on what you're doing, turn off distractions for those deep tasks, but then give yourself a bit of a break. So whether that break is you get up and go for a walk, you go and get a coffee, or you check your email. So that's one of the reasons why I like to kind of check my email once an hour, because for me, email is bubblegum. It's light. It's relatively easy. So I like to just chew some bubblegum once an hour and give myself 5 minutes to go, okay, this is happening. Don't have to think too hard about this. And once I've done my email for a few minutes, I then go, right, let's focus again.
Yeah, that's great. I love that analogy. Emails, bubblegum. It's like, yeah, pop on a bubblegum, chew, get some dopamine, and then get out again. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Not a lot of nutrition, but it's kind of nice.
Yeah. All right, here's a bigger picture one from one of the people on Facebook. And he says, the fusion of AI and robotics is going to progressively replace all the jobs, according to your different perspectives, but there is a general consensus that AI and robotics will take up a lot of jobs in the pursuit of productivity. And he asked, what does it mean for a human being to be more productive? Do we need more productivity in a world awash with stuff, material, and digital? So I think it's speaking to the bigger picture of what are we actually trying to do when we're becoming more productive? And is this going against what we really need to be doing as humans? What's your perspective on that, Dermot?
Yeah, very good question. So, look, there's no doubt that AI is here and it is going to have a dramatic effect on how we work. But I reckon that AI can, in the short term anyway, as far as I can see to the horizon, I reckon it's going to help us to be more efficient, but it's not necessarily ready to help us to be more effective. And what I mean by that is robots are going to take the menial tasks, the drudgery work away from us, and hopefully free humans up to focus more on the creative work or the decision making or the strategic work that computers are going to find it very hard to do. In the foreseeable future, there will be a time when computers can do that as well. But for the moment, I think that that's the opportunity for us to spend more time doing that. I think if you go right back to Henry Ford and his Model T motor car, one of the things that he did when he created the production line was he enormously enhanced the efficiency of how we made a motor car, because you had a bunch of people who would make motor cars all together. They'd all stand around the chassis of the car and they'd all do their stuff. And it was a very slow, laborious process. But when he actually went out into the wider industry and he saw that really people making cars, there was nothing innovative out there. They were all doing the same thing. So he knew if he wanted to find a better way of making cars, he needed to look outside of the motor industry. And he actually came up with the idea for the conveyor belt or the production line from a meat processing plant, where they would put carcasses onto a hook, and then they'd pass them down a line of butchers who each had a specialized job to do. And it was far more efficient, and they could deal with a lot more carcasses. And he realized that if he did the same with a motor car, then he could increase the output enormously. And I think he reduced the time it took to make a Model T Ford from somewhere around 11 hours down to 1 hour, 45 minutes. Massive increase in efficiency. But effectiveness is different, because effectiveness for me talks to not just about how much work you can churn out, it's about the quality of the work that you do. And when I work with people around their inboxes and that, yeah, I'm trying to make them more efficient. But really the whole point of me helping someone get their inbox down to zero is not so they can do more emails. It's so they can get their head out of their inbox and they can focus on the really important, creative, strategic things that are going to have an impact.
Yeah.
And I think that's what AI is going to do for us. It's going to actually allow us to do the work that really has an impact. And I think we need to see that as an opportunity and not a threat.
Oh, I like that perspective. I think that's it's a really proactive, abundant way of looking at what's coming potentially. Because whenever I talk about this future of robots and AI, there's always two different worldviews. There's the one where it's the job apocalypse and we're all going to hell, and the other version, which is pioneered by Peter Diamandis, which is a world of abundance, where all this AI and robotics will actually free up, as you've mentioned, capacity for creative thinking, so we can actually tackle the bigger picture issues that we've got on our plate. And I think that's sort of what perhaps my Facebook reader was talking about, is like, is it just doing more stuff? And it's good to know that, no, it's not about doing more stuff. It's about doing better stuff, so that we can progress as a human race.
There's a great book by a guy called Michael Bungay Steiner, and I'm mispronouncing his name, I know. He wrote a book called Do More Great Work, and he talks about the idea of, in all of our roles, we've got bad work, we've got good work, and we've got great work. And what we need to do is to try and eradicate the bad work, the stuff that really is not a good use of our time. And I reckon AI can help us to do that. The good work is our business as usual stuff. It's core to our roles. So we all need to be maintained doing that. But we need to make more time for the great work, because the great work is the stuff that will actually have a real impact. And when I'm working with people, I'm always trying to find a bit more time in their schedule to do the great work, because that is the stuff that's going to leave a legacy, and that is usually the stuff that really has an impact in 5 years' time, not just today or tomorrow. So I think there's a nice overlap there as well.
Great. Thanks. And I have one last question for you. Speaking of zooming back to the immediacy stuff, what are your favorite automation apps, software, that kind of stuff?
Sure. Well, first of all, the stuff that's already at our fingertips. So if you're using Microsoft Outlook, that is by far my favorite productivity tool that has ever been invented. And there's lots of productivity tools out there, but it's the one that's been built from the ground up as a true productivity and workflow system. Yeah. The problem is most people don't use it the way it was designed to be used. They only partially use it, and we've talked all about that. So the first thing I'd say is, if you're using Microsoft Outlook, or indeed if you're using Gmail as your email client, learn to use the full system rather than just using bits and pieces of it. So that's number one. Number two, there's a lot of new tools coming online now, because we're all working in the cloud, and if you're not in the cloud yet, you've got to get yourself into the cloud, because what the cloud allows you to do is make sure that you can work anywhere on any device and have access to your information. So there's lots of cloud-based productivity tools that have emerged over the last couple of years, especially around project management. So things like Trello, Asana, Basecamp, Slack, they're all different variations on being able to collaborate on more complex work with other people. And I think that there's a very exciting space where, if people learned how to use these tools effectively at a team level, then their productivity would also increase. So I won't say any one of those tools is better than the other. They're all really cool. What I would say is choose one and use it well. Don't try and use them all, because they just compete with each other. Another favorite of mine is, from a contextual point of view, is a tool from Microsoft called OneNote. Or if you're not in a Microsoft environment, Evernote would probably be the equivalent.
Or you can do OneNote on a Mac, on an iPad and stuff like that. It is compatible.
That's exactly right, yeah, but it's still a Microsoft product. So what people in corporate would probably find, if they're using Microsoft Office, they'll already have OneNote and it's free. Right. But if you're working in a Gmail organization, they're not going to have Office, because they're using Google Docs and that. So they might use Evernote. But either way, I see a tool like Microsoft Outlook as being a chronological tool that helps you to manage your time and to manage activities within the time that you have available. Whereas a tool like OneNote or Evernote, they're contextual tools. They help you to manage information within the context of a project or a meeting or a discussion or a relationship. And again, I'm so frustrated when I go into organizations and I say, who uses OneNote? And I might get 1 in 10 would put up their hand and say, I use it. and yet it's on the desktop. It's a tool that they've got access to, but people just haven't made the mental leap to putting away their paper notepad and harnessing the power of digital, because it's far more powerful than your paper notebook.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I love that you pick up on these tools. So I'm like, yes, tick, I'm doing things well. I use Trello and Slack and Wunderlist, which is, those are the three cloud-based apps that we use as a team at Inner Compass. And they're just so good. It just makes life so much easier to be able to collaborate. That's for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
I have about half a dozen other questions for you on productivity and cultures, but I think what we might do is stop and save that for a different interview. That's all right, because I suspect
good. Yeah, because I think there's a whole other layer we could talk about in a different one.
Yeah, and I think we've got heaps of great tips and insight from what we've covered already today. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your infinite wisdom. You funny little Irish larrikin, you, with your silly accent.
Oh, I'm going red now, Zoe.
Well, you already made
my pleasure.
So there you go. Your book is fabulous, and it is a best-selling business book that Wiley put out. Was it just last year, 2016?
It was the 1st of January 2016. Yeah,
and it's fabulous. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes, which are zoerouth.com/podcast/smartwork. So thanks again, Dermot.
My pleasure. Bye-bye, everyone.